Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I've got Mac joining me. Welcome, Mac.
Good evening.
And Gio.
What is good, everyone?
On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about a race in the Premier League, and no, not the one that Chelsea is in, trying to make the top half of the table, but the relegation battle, actually. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at House of_Footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. But yeah, let's just dive straight into the relegation battle and what that means. Of course, the latest news come out that Nottingham Forest were deducted 4 points. So that took them from, I believe it was 25 points to 21 points now. And that actually drops them into the relegation zone. And Luton Town, as the time of recording, are safe. Now, I want to then toss it to you, Mac, and of course we're going to start from the bottom to the top, just how you like your women. Let's hear from you. Out of these three teams, let's start off from there. Any of them have a chance of staying up?
In terms of that are currently in the bottom three, I think arguably it's only Nottingham Forest. I have a soft spot for Burnley, to be honest. I think that if going into the season, they were the team that were of the promoted teams that I thought were I was most confident actually staying in the Premier League. They haven't performed up to standard this season, and I think they still have arguably, if you go player by player quality, the best of the three kind of promoted teams, the best individual players that most of their teams would be attractive to take on if Burnley were to be relegated. However, so I think that they have a chance. But realistically, it should just be Nottingham Forest, Burnley with a small chance. But there is absolutely no chance for Sheffield United, in my opinion. And just want to be able to break down some numbers for the both of you, gents. A question I kind of pose is that, is it possible that we have a season with one of the worst points totals in Premier League history from this Sheffield United team? I think it's fairly possible. In terms of the top five, the tied amount of points for fifth worst in Premier League history is Sunderland with 19. Sheffield United currently sit on 14 points, and they have 10 games left the season. So that means they need to win. Just to match that, they need to win what? They need to win a game and pick up a couple of other draws, right? Do we see that happening with the Sheffield United team? In all likelihood, not. And the reason why, I just want to be able to kind of go, if you just go over a simple number, which I always find interesting when you're looking at Premier League teams and how well they're doing in comparison to the rest of the league around them, is goal difference. Sheffield United right now has a negative 50 goal difference. And if we kind of just extrapolate out what they'll finish the season on, if what they've done so far this season plays out for the rest of the season, they'll finish at a negative 61.7. So it's rounded up, negative 62 goal difference. Where do you think that ranks all time in negative goal difference in Premier League history?
That has to be at the bottom. That has to be at the bottom.
The worst? Gio, do you think it's the worst?
It has to be, right? 67 goal difference negative?
Second worst.
Gio is correct. Second worst. Only worst team was 0708 Derby County. I think at one point they lost 6-0 to Liverpool, 5-0 to Liverpool in consecutive games where you just had like a negative goal difference that they were kind of destroyed on. And at that point, I think if I recall correctly, that's actually the worst points total team in Premier League history as well. So they have the worst of worst in both areas, and Sheffield United is knocking right on the door. So they may be in the Premier League, but they're trying to make history in the worst way possible. So for me, I think they have a shot. Gio, are you more confident in Sheffield United than I am?
I would say no. I think we all should be on the same boat here. Sheffield United, obviously, they had a decent run the first time round when they were still in the Prem, but obviously getting back into the Prem, they weren't what they used to be. 14 points on 28 matches. Quite poor. Again, the negative 50 screams the loudest. And listen, it's one thing to say, you may not be the best away playing side, playing in another team's stadium, but they're 2-2-10 at home, which is not ideal at all to be a even a professional sports team of any nature, you always want to play your best at home, and clearly, evidently, based on numbers' sake, they haven't been doing so. The team that I think in the bottom three right now who have the best chance of staying up, even with the points deduction or whatever the case may be, that is going on with them, is in fact Nottingham Forest. Again, a lot of, you know, misled hope they sold to a lot of their fans because of all the new signings in and out. They could probably have a new starting 11 every match of the entire season if they wanted to. But they still can't find something that works for them. At least well enough that they're consistently out of that bottom three, or in the relegation talks. But if one team had the best chance, it would have to be Nottingham Forest. Luton Town is just scraping by right now. Um, Although would love for Luton Town to stay afloat and stay in the Prem, just of what kind of shithousery they have caused to these teams, and banging in goals. It's fantastic to watch.
Yeah, right off the bat, again, the only thing I have to say is sucks to be Chris Wilder, who joined the team that he was previously managing, and actually I think brought up to the Premier League in a previous attempt, but looks like he's going to go back to the Championship with that team, and I hope that he stays because he was able to. I think I was looking into it. He was able to get 100 points with Sheffield United previously to get into the Premier League. So big ups to him. Hopefully, it will go better next season for him. But yeah, I do have to agree, and it's crazy. We were talking about it. Just what was the last transfer? Not last transfer window, but the previous year, where Nottingham Forest was signing players left and right, and we actually didn't even know who they were eventually going to play because they had so many players coming in and out. And of course, there's the joke about Chelsea where they signed so many players they needed to make an extra space in their sort of changing room for all these incoming players. But yeah, Nottingham Forest, I just have to say they are, of course, fairly given that that penalty, and it should be used as an example for future clubs. Maybe we'll see something of that sort for maybe Chelsea or Man City in the coming future, but that's another topic that we can discuss at a later time. For Nottingham Forest, though, yeah, they likely are, and I think with Nuno Espirito Santo, he can come and change things around. I think he's had a decent start to his Nottingham Forest tenure so far. I think he's had 12 games, 3 wins, 2 draws, and 7 losses. Not the best, but almost a point per game. So you kind of have to give him the benefit of the doubt with the experience that he has in the Premier League to sort of get out of that position. At Burnley, I'm not too sure, Mac. I want to see the positive side to it, but I'm not liking their chances as much just because of how poor defensively, much like Sheffield United have been. They too have been very, very poor in that regard. So, I think we all agree that Nottingham Forest is probably the only team that can make it out of the bottom 3. Then that leaves us, Mac. Then out of the teams that are directly above them, are there any teams that stand out to you that you might fear for, or that you want to highlight?
So I want to go on the positive sense from the bottom half of the Premier League table, and who's going to be in the relegation race. And I think the only team that we may talk about, if we were to say, let's just kind of state the argument of who's in the relegation race. I think obviously Sheffield United at 20th, you're going all the way up to Crystal Palace at arguably 14th, who are 29 points. I think you can make the argument they're in the relegation battle, but obviously I think that might be a little bit out there, considering that means we believe Nottingham Forest can still get 8 points for the rest of the season. Who knows? For me, though, in that between those ranges of teams, I am most confident in Everton. Here's the reason why, to kind of break it down of why I think it's the case. If you look at a couple different numbers of the overlying of how well they've played, and also to why they've underperformed and what's going to be their keys for the rest of the season, I think you got to start off with expected goals. They have an expected goals right now in the Premier League at positive 2.6. There are currently a few teams actually in the top half of the table with the worst expected goal difference than them. And they're all the way at the bottom of the Premier League table. You're looking at Manchester United with expected goal difference of negative 4.2, West Ham with an expected goal difference of negative 10, and Wolves with an expected goal difference of negative 10.3. So what's the difference, and why haven't Everton kind of been clinical in those situations? And I would argue the area of concern has been their strikers. Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Beto have had decent moments, but on the whole of it, I would argue have been very poor. And even if they were bang average strikers in their position, Everton would be flying up the table as well as not having the points deduction. To give you a frame of reference, between Beto and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, they have an expected goals combined thus far this year of 14. And they've scored 5 combined between the two of them. And I apologize to you, Ray. So someone that gets showed a lot online on Twitter, Mr. Darweezy, has an expected goals of 13.5 and has scored 10 in the Premier League. So as a frame of reference, people say he misses that many chances. If you fuse Beto, if you do the Dragon Ball Z fusion, RIP Akira Toriyama, if you do the fusion between Beto and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, you're getting a messed up fusion there that's not playing well in football at the moment. So I think for them, that's the key. If they're even slightly below average or even worse than in terms of taking chances as Darwin Núñez, this team would be flying up the table. So that's their difference, and why that their system that they play with Sean Dyche is very successful. And I think that they'll get across the finish line because the underlying numbers show that there is a good team there. They just haven't performed and has been clinical enough in those moments to rake in those points that they need.
That's a great shout, actually. Looking at their goals against 39, and the closest team in the bottom there that's sort of even remotely close is Crystal Palace with 48 goals. So they have a better goal difference of they've conceded 9 fewer goals than a team that's 2 places above them, and so that gives you hope at least that Everton can if they can keep things tight. Hope something happens for them on the other end. Sean Dyche will give you some type of set piece, and you'll probably score from something like that. There's hope there, and of course we have to note that they were deducted 10 points initially and then given 4 back, I think. And at the moment, that's all we know. They could be deducted more points, but that's what we know at the moment, and that's pretty much what we go from. But I guess, Gio, any comments on maybe Everton or any other teams down there that you want to mention?
I'd like to think that Everton is pretty good. I would say that I wouldn't say they're in the clear, but I would put money that they wouldn't fall into the bottom, the bottom 3 into the relegation zone. Again, they've had some poor run-up games recently, but I think they show enough that they can scrape away with draws, which I honestly can't say for some, of the 3 teams in the relegation zone. I can't say the same for them. I don't think they just provide enough. I think they simply just don't have the Premier League talent when it comes to their team, whether it be on the bench or their starting 11. I just don't think they quite have the talent there. Not to say Luton has that much more than them, but Luton, I think, apart from all the big signings that Nottingham Forest have kind of forced themselves to make, I think they're just better managed. It's not always about who you bring in. It's about working with what you have and how you use your players. And I think Luton Town have, although only 1 point above Nottingham Forest, have done a great job of doing so. So Everton, I agree with Mac. I think, they still have a possibility, but I think they're in the clear. Brentford, I can't see them losing as many games as the other 3 in the relegation zone. Ivan Toney, I would always put my money on him, as he would himself. And of course, unless Crystal Palace has, blunders of epic proportions, it would be hard for them to dip. But if I had to say, if there were a team to have a blunder of epic proportions, I think it would be Crystal Palace. I just don't think they have been great at all. I mean, we might be harsh saying that, just because of the expectations of the players, but I don't think they've had quite a great season. and I don't think they would have a season they would be considerably proud of either.
Yeah, Crystal Palace is a tricky one, Mac, because I think they're let's be honest, apart from Eze and Elise, they're not good. But they're just good enough that the bottom three teams are just so bad. They have to really, like you said, mess it up to be in that conversation. So if they have Elise or Eze, at least they'll get something from their games. I wanted to touch on Luton Town though. It is interesting for me that I've been watching or keeping eyes on their scores recently, and they seem to lose by 1 goal margin very, very often. And it seems like it's just they have the capability of coming back from games when they're down quite heavily. Joe, you probably remember the Man U game where they could have came back, but of course Man U eventually won. They lost to Bournemouth 4-3, and then lost to Aston Villa 3-2 as well recently. And I want to give them the benefit of the doubt at home. Like I said, I've been talking about this all season. Their home crowd, I think, is sort of what's driving them, and those games are going to be huge because they have Arsenal, Man City, West Ham, Spurs still in their remaining 9 games away, but they are home to Bournemouth, Brentford, Everton, and Fulham. So those types of games there, Fulham at the end of the last day of the season, where I think nothing really matters, could be another sort of way for them to get extra points. So I do give them a little bit of hope, but not too much compared to Nottingham Forest and how the quality that they have, the experience that they have in the Premier League. I think it might come through for them, but those are the two teams that I think might flip on any given day, given how these two teams play out. But I guess I did want to toss it back to you guys, but I wanted to mention Brentford as well for a number of reasons. Yes, Brentford is Ivan Toney's team, but without Ivan Toney, are they that good? And you could say pretty much based on their standings, they are not. Thomas Frank has been working his magic there, and he's gotten as far this season, almost 1 point per game, 17 losses, 7 wins, and 5 draws. Not a great season. He's been there for quite a while, and of course, we loved his management style. Could this be if they do get relegated, could this be the end of his time there? I don't see him staying with Brentford in the Championship, and I know that there are some Premier League clubs that could be in for him, the likes of Chelsea and or Liverpool, perhaps. Of course, those have been rumors, so I'm not sure if you guys want to take me up on that, but that's just what I wanted to mention. Mac, any comment on that?
Yes, so I definitely want to circle back to a couple of the other teams that you both have mentioned to go through, but to be able to go straight into your Brentford point, for me, outside of the Luton, Nottingham Forest, Burnley, Sheffield United, I think Brentford for me are in the most precarious position because since the return of Ivan Toney, where everyone looked at he would be a kind of a solve to their season, he scored 4 goals in 10 games, a decent return, not a fantastic return, not an earth-shattering return. And I think he somewhat caused a structural problem with the team. Okay, if we have him back, we've been less fluid in the way that we play because they used to be able to kind of have Mbomo or Wisa or Neil Maupay in more flexible positions that rotate and a little bit more free flowing where you don't really know where the attack is coming from. Where now everything is built around Ivan Toney once again, the team hasn't adjusted to playing with him. So they've caused a new wrinkle by him coming back in the season. Who knows how good of a player is he long term, how successful he'll be if he does move on to a different club. But I think he's actually caused a problem for Brentford. And if you look at their points return prior to coming back, in the last 5 games, they picked up a single point. And is that necessary to throw it all at his feet? No. Well, maybe he gambled on it, who knows. But I think at the very worst, you can say, hey, we've had a negative impact because you may be a great player, but it's impacted everyone else. And the question would be, is he a floor raiser of everyone else around him, or is he just successful because everything is built around him? I don't know. And I think that's something that we'll have to figure out if Brentford are going to stay up. Again, to be completely transparent, all likely they should be fine because the real bottom teams have been as piss poor as they are. But it's a concerning sign where in one of the worst, I would argue, groupings of relegation battles that you may have, that Brentford are this close. And if they don't want to be in the identical position next year, if they even stay up, they need to definitely address and make some changes. In regards to Thomas Frank, though, definitely, I think he's definitely grown out of this job. If you look at just like the size of the club, and I know this is not necessarily a fair metric, they're the third lowest attending Premier League team due to their stadium in the Premier League. Like, it's not a large club. It doesn't garner as much attention. So it's hard for them necessarily to compete financially with a lot of the other clubs around them. So is it natural for moving on to, okay, quote unquote, bigger club, considering how well he's done with these meager resources? Absolutely. So I wouldn't be surprised with that. But that just further compounds the issue of there is something to the, maybe aside from Thomas Frank, there is something to the core of wrong with Brentford that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, they are going to eventually be a team that just drops down in the near future. Jen, I think you wanted to jump in about Brentford. If I think you were signaling that.
No, I just think, I think it has a lot to do with what you said. I think Ivan Toney has obviously done a lot for the club, but again, a lot of things are built around for him. So can they do this without him? Hard to say because last year he was so pivotal in their success. But this year, even when he's gone, and even when he's back, it doesn't seem like it's done all that much per se. Are we being a little harsh on him? Maybe. He just hasn't had the time under his belt, which is unfortunate. But again, I think as long as they stay up and they're able to obviously stay afloat in the Premier League, the money that they accumulate from selling Ivan Toney to reinvest into the club, I think is going to be a great look for them. I think they should keep Thomas Frank for the project. I think he has a great eye for players, and I think he's able to kind of use what he has to the best of his ability. I think if Brentford were to let Thomas Frank go, I think a lot of clubs, mid-table clubs, would be looking to Thomas Frank for a managerial role. So I don't think they should let go of him by any means. I think it'd be a mistake. Use Toney to your advantage now. Obviously, try to get Toney to score, to bag a couple more goals while there's games left to drive the value up. But yeah, I don't think they should stray away from that immediately. I think what they should do is continue playing around Toney as he likes, as they need. Again, Toney's success is going to be the club's success in the upcoming months. So, obviously in England call-up, his value is there. The English tax is going to be there. So the best that they can do for the club is continue to playing the way they like, and that's to surround Toney and feed Toney the ball and let Toney do what Toney does.
Yeah, without a doubt, I don't think they'll really stray away from this game plan. But my question is, if we can all, I guess most of us agree. I think the general consensus is Ivan Toney is likely leaving, regardless of what happens with Brentford. So if they do get relegated, I think Thomas Frank would also go, and that of course leaves things open for anyone to come and swoop in for him. And for Brentford, it'll just be another I guess rebuilding season. They'll probably get the probably be one of the better clubs in the championship, and then of course get the parachute payments. But and then likely pick up someone else and then make their way up back to the Premier League if they can. But I'm just interested to see what will happen if they do go down. And conversely, if they do stay up, will he stay? Will he be? Will other offers look too good to turn down for him? I'm just thinking a lot, of course. There, but I guess at this point, do we want to make our predictions on sort of what the bottom three will look like, or basically what the 18th place team will finish at the end of the season?
I want to touch on Crystal Palace slightly, if that's okay, because I think you both chatted on them. Where I think their argument is they aren't 29 points, so they are in the relegation race. In some ways, like I said, I was most confident about Everton, and of that like next grouping, I was least confident about Brentford. So just wanted to share how I felt about Crystal Palace. Quick question, trivia time, boys. Who do you think has started more games for Crystal Palace this year? Jordan Ayew or Olise and Eze combined? In reference, to let you know, they have played so far 28 games thus far this season. Don't look it up, Gio. No, look it up.
No. That's a trick. I know that's a trick question.
This might be a trick question.
I know that's a trick question.
I just serious question. Do you guys have? What do you lean to? Who started more games?
I think Jordan Ayew as well, because Lisa and Eze have been missing so much, and like I said, without them, Crystal Palace are probably the most average team in the Premier League, and he screams the most average Premier League player, or one of the most average types of Premier League players. No offense to him.
Both would be correct. He's started 25 games. They've started a combined 23. And not even just starts, because if you want to be like, oh, Andrew, you're just picking around by choosing, what about minutes? They've actually played fewer minutes combined than Jordan Ayew as well. So if we had a normal, healthier season from either Olise or Eze, would this team be where they are? I don't think so. They're tied in their team lead in goals with 6 apiece, with Odsonne Edouard, who actually is not starting anymore because Mateta's been starting more recent games, who sits on 5 goals. So if Olise or Eze were playing the minutes that Jordan Ayew was, or even close to the minutes that Jordan Ayew was, and full respect, not really, to Jordan Ayew, this team would be doing much better than they are. That they wouldn't have seen such a sense of rigidity in their attack, where they have that creative element. And those are the 2 players I think we can all agree that are very exciting talents that a lot of other teams in the Premier League and Europe are looking at to potentially take away from Palace. And they are really, with Zaha leaving, the straws that stir the drink. So I want to defend them a little bit, where, again, I think if all things being equal, if they just had an average season from either one of them, they would be much further higher up the table. So again, that's why I'm not worried about them going down. I'm in that grouping. I'm fairly confident they'll be fine, because Eze's now back. He's playing well. Olise is supposed to be back by mid-April. So that should be within the next 2 rounds of games in terms of the return from the international break. So if they start to come back around to form, they should be fine.
Well, of course, we'll have to see what happens there, because without them, it's really going to be a struggle. But I guess I wanted to ask you guys, lastly, before we, of course, end off the podcast, then, which team do you kind of have being relegated at the end of the season? I guess I'll start. Selfishly, I want to say it's going to be Nottingham Forest. The points deduction is tough. They've struggled throughout the whole season. Really, where it's gotten them to really, before the point deduction, really just be 3 points above the relegation zone. And so, that being said, new manager hasn't done as well as sort of people expected, even though he's had the experience there. And just selfishly, I want Luton Town to stay in the Premier League. So that's cards on the table. That's just my choice and my prediction. I'll toss it to you guys though. Maybe Gio. What's the team that's gonna finish in the last relegation battle spot for you?
The final spot. Yeah, no, I think I'd have to agree. I think sorry to the listeners that think I may say something different in terms of the drama, but I think Nottingham Forest, again, the inconsistency levels speak very loudly, and when they do have great games, it's usually followed up with a plethora of bad ones. And I think, again, they struggle to score, and for whatever reason, Luton doesn't seem to struggle to score. They score many goals in a singular game, and that's across many games as well. So at this point, we can't consider it a fluke. They're able to get goals. Some way, somehow, they figure it out. And I do hope that they do stay afloat in the Premier League. I just don't think the Premier League has seen enough of Luton. Again, I just love the fact that traveling teams are so used to playing at these 80,000 capacity fan stadiums, and they go to Luton Town and walk through someone's house into the backyard, and that's the stadium. So I love it. I hope they stay afloat. But yeah, Nottingham Forest, stay right where you are.
Okay, and Mac, of course, finishes off with your prediction.
So I'm going to go spicy here. So I think Sheffield United's gone. I think Luton Town's gone, and I think Nottingham Forest is gone. So I actually think Burnley has a chance to stay up. And again, in all likelihood, I'm wrong here, but I think it's the most fun. Again, it's what I picked at the beginning of the season, so I'm going to stick with that. And I think, interestingly enough, the decider of who potentially kind of goes down, arguably, I think, could come from Sheffield United. Because they play in back-to-back weeks, Burnley, and then 2 weeks later they face Nottingham Forest. So they very much are a decider of who do we want to take down to the Premier League with us, and I think could have a large impact. In regards to Burnley, though, I'll be honest with you, and I'm going to be transparent. I think you both are right. I'm still going to pick what I have because Burnley have the hardest schedule. They still have to face Chelsea, Manchester United, Newcastle, and Tottenham and Brighton. So it's a murderous row. But they face Sheffield United, and on the final day of the Premier League season, they actually face Nottingham Forest. So what I would want to see is that final game potentially to be a decider of what could happen and see how it shakes out. So overall, I'm still going to stick with my preseason decision there and kind of roll the dice. But I do think you guys are the most correct. I'm just stubborn.
So we could potentially see a reverse Aguero moment where companies, of course, now managing and could score a last-minute winner against Nottingham Forest, depending on points, and then Nottingham Forest gets relegated. Fantastic drama, of course. If it does happen, we'll of course keep an eye on that, and we'll of course talk you guys through it all throughout the rest of the season. But guys, this concludes our podcast for today. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social media. That's at @houseof_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well. houseoffooty@hotmail.com is our email. The next time you hear from us will be Tuesday when we bring you guys a special episode. Of course, there's a lot of managers that we just talked about and a lot of vacant manager positions coming up in the off season, and we'll try to pair and match them up to the best of our ability, bias or without bias, but you just have to tune in to hear all of that. But thank you for joining us, Mac.
Barsha, keep your grubby hands off Arteta. Don't even look at him, bruv.
Thank you, Gio.
I hope Liverpool just sign anyone. Sign someone from the MLS for all I care.
Thank you guys. See you guys soon.